Stellantis issues massive warning to the U.S. economy.
In auto news, Stellantis posted a loss of $2.7 billion the last quarter.
While sales are going on and a lot of product inventories hitting the road, the fact remains is sales are in the toilet and it's a major slump.
Automotive experts I spoke with say U.S. automakers must adapt quickly.
Stellantis has been dropping in sales year over year. The second quarter results here in 2024 show that they're down another 24% from the year before. On top, it was down 15% from the year before that.
Stellantis is its own problem. It got into trouble more than a year ago that had nothing to do with tariffs. Tariffs just make it a whole lot worse for Stellantis.
Stellantis reporting losses in the billions for the quarter is not a good sign for the industry.
A big part of the problem is the pricing. Of course, a lot of the product line isn't necessarily up to snuff, and there's a lot of great competition out there, leaving Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Dodge, Chrysler in the lurch. With Chrysler only having one vehicle in their arsenal, the brand is almost defunct. And subsidiary brands like Dodge are down in sales, with the Dodge Durango being only one of the few little bright spots. These vehicles aren't selling particularly well either, but they're the only ones even holding the brand Dodge together, which was once a thriving company, is now a company basically on the verge of going upside down. With prices like $83,000 for a Dodge Durango, it makes you wonder, how can anybody even consider buying one of these with costs that prohibitive? How can this company stay afloat? And this has been going on and on and on for a significant amount of time, the last 4 years or so. Or Jeep's going from $85,000 Canadian dollars to get into one of these vehicles. It makes you wonder how people can even afford it. And Ram is one of the few brands within Stellantis that has actually been keeping afloat, and a lot of it has to do with the massive incentives that you're seeing. But a lot of these trucks are coming at a significant price tag, leaving a lot of buyers in the lurch and unable to spend the dollars on a lot of these vehicles. For example, here we have a 1500 SST Ram, and they don't come at a necessarily cheap price tag. But how much does this go for? Well, this goes for a whopping $73,000. And then you think about, what is that out the door price? Well, you start axing admin fees, taxes. Next thing, a lot of these trucks that are going for $70,000 or $80,000 plus taxes and fees, you're out the door 85, 90 grand. And then you get into the HD trucks that they're going for well over six figures. And now you ask the question, is it any surprise that these vehicles aren't selling? How did we get to the point where they cost as much as they do? And it's obvious with incentives you're seeing all over the place with Ram Power Days. See in the store for 0% APR. Of course, there's lots of incentives and opportunities to get a good deal, which represents the fact that some of these vehicles are going off the lot. But the fact is, sales are down and profit margins are down. Why are margins down on these vehicles? A few short years ago, the unions negotiated on behalf of the workers, the frontline workers that are building these vehicles, and they managed to come out looking rosy. They got their raises, everybody was happy, they got their income. Of course, they had to meet up with cost of living increases, but in doing that, the flip side is now that reduced the margins for a lot of these manufacturers like Stellantis, and a lot of these brands become less competitive. So during the vehicle shortage, Stellantis believed that they could charge whatever they wanted for a lot of their vehicles, and people were paying that, largely because of the fact that you couldn't find anything, new or used, so people were willing to pay and pay a lot more. But Stellantis was one of those brands that actually cranked their prices up a lot higher than even the industry average. And when we do an inflationary cost increase over the last 10 years and do the calculation, that looks to be around 35%. But the average vehicle in Stellantis land has gone up by 45%, close to 50% on some models. The problem is now with these newly negotiated wages, now that people no longer have the money, they're looking at keeping their money a little closer. Cost of housing's gone up, food's gone up, inflation's gone up in the last couple of years dramatically. Now that there's a lot of inventory by every single brand on the planet, that now leaves Stellantis with these highly priced vehicles with small margins in a place where they can't compete because of these highly priced renegotiated wages from the frontline workers. Now the margins are tighter and Stellantis can't drop the prices what they need to do the most to be competitive. Prices have to stay high just to make a profit. So the latest statistics show that Jeep is one of the few brands that's actually holding things together for Stellantis. They've gone up about 1% in this second quarter of 2025. And Ram sales have even gone up as much as 5% in the second quarter, largely because of some of the huge incentives. And let's face it, let's be quite frank that Dodge and Ram products certainly are not the same anymore. Ram is one of the stalwarts, and there's been lots of conversation about bringing back the Hemi. That certainly helped some of the discussion about sales going up. The talk about Hemi coming back and the electrification sort of taking a decline or a backseat means that a lot of the Ram buyers and loyalists are continually looking. The fact that it also has that new Hurricane engine in some of the models means that a lot of people are interested in the brand from another perspective. It might be bringing in a new clientele. Here we have the turbo diesel. We also notice the 3/4 ton and the 1 ton trucks that carry the diesel engines have always been a good workhorse and have always done very well for the brand. And sometimes it's a need more than a want, and that's why some of the Rams, being not just for funds, but they actually go to work. So these constantly have the buying capacity, and the sales are certainly there for Ram. So Ram's gone up by as little as 5%. But sadly, Dodge decreased by 48% in the second quarter from the time the year before. And a lot of that is because of these brands right here, the Dodge, the Durango, we've already said, highly priced vehicles, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 US to get into a Durango. But it's even worse when you look at the Dodge Hornets. The Hornets have been one of those vehicles that's essentially an Alfa Romeo Tonale, another extension or an arm of Stellantis, more so in Europe, but they also sell the Alfa Romeo Tonale, which is essentially cookie cutter or ditto, if you will. And these vehicles are priced extraordinarily high too for what you get. And a lot of people just aren't seeing the value in these small SUVs. When you see small SUV, you think small dollars, but the problem is it's not small dollars, and these vehicles seem to be commanding a huge price tag, meaning that people don't see the value. They don't want to spend the hard-earned dollars, and especially on something when they don't look like they're getting the value there. And so Dodge, as a rule, has not been selling all that well, and sales are down almost 50%. And Chrysler, which is really the only one minivan, that's all they have in their arsenal. And they call it different things, from the, essentially Pacifica to the Caravan or Grand Caravan. But call it whatever you want. I call it late for dinner because they clearly can't read the room. And here, let's take a look at the price tag on this vehicle. As we look around, you have the alloys on here and lots of room there, but you also have a price tag of $68,000 on this vehicle, meaning you got to pay 70 grand plus all the extras. You're going to be 75, 80 out the door for one of these vehicles. Not a very competitive space for a vehicle that doesn't have the highest level of durability, and especially for family buyers, because that's not the young, well-heeled buyers, that's family people are buying these vehicles, and those are the ones that are looking for value. And at 70, 80 grand does not necessarily resemble the most amount of value. So sales are down 42% on these vehicles as well. It's a surprise they're even around. So with inventory levels continually to rise and rise and rise, it's not a surprise when you see a lot of these vehicles on the lot. Now, a lot of these is afflicting a lot of the manufacturers. Ford, same thing, having a similar problem. So is GM. Have you seen General Motors or Chevy lots these days? They are packed from corner to corner, end to end, and they can't sell their products fast enough.
General Motors reported its revenue is down more than 30%.
Now, while Stellantis is starting to sell some of their metal and they're starting to move these vehicles, they're worried about floor plan costs. Floor plans costing them charges on every single vehicle for every single month that goes by. So they're really trying to hustle these vehicles out the door. But the more of these vehicles sit around, the longer they sit around, the harder it is for them to remain competitive. The worst part is they can't even drop prices that aggressively anymore without tightening up and overlapping in their profit margins, meaning that because they're locked in with some of their core costs, like wages on some of the frontline workers, means they can no longer really adjust their pricing to be competitive. And when I see a truck at $118,000 out the door, you're at 130, 135 grand. How can anybody afford these vehicles? But yet, some are selling. But is it enough to keep the brand in business? Literally, Stellantis is struggling with the sales of almost every single one of their brands. Even Fiat, Alfa Romeo, Maserati is off the charts. Sales are absolutely in the toilet. And there's been lots of discussions of which brand should actually wave bye-bye. There's been many enthusiasts out there that say that they should part some of these brands out, sell them to other manufacturers. And unfortunately, while there's a glimmer of hope with the sales of the new Fiat 500e, the fact remains the mass majority of the Fiat and the European versions are not doing particularly well here in North America. Things are getting rough, things are getting dire, things are getting ugly.